Her name was Claire, 37 years old, living alone in a one-bedroom apartment in Portland, Oregon, with a window that faced a brick wall and a coffee maker she'd named Gerald. From the outside, her life looked fine. A steady job as a medical billing coordinator, a small circle of friends who texted too infrequently, and a calendar that always seemed fuller than her heart. But every November, something shifted inside her. November was when her mother called. Not to ask how she was doing. Not to say I miss you or I've been thinking about you. Her mother called in November because Thanksgiving was coming, and Thanksgiving meant the family photo. Every year, same tradition. Everyone dressed in muted tones, burgundy, navy, cream, standing in front of the fireplace at her stepfather's house. Everyone smiling the way people smile when someone is pointing a camera at them and they've been told to look happy. Claire had stopped going 3 years ago. She told her friends it was because of the drive. 4 hours each way. But that wasn't it. The truth was simpler and heavier than that. The truth was that she could sit in a room full of her own family and feel more invisible than she did eating takeout alone on her couch. It hadn't always been like that. Or maybe it had, and she'd just been too young to name it. She was 7 when her mother remarried. She remembered the day clearly. Not the wedding itself, but the morning after, standing in the kitchen of a house that suddenly wasn't just her and her mom's anymore. Her new stepfather, David, wasn't cruel. He wasn't the villain from a fairy tale. He was something harder to explain. He was simply indifferent. And indifference, Claire had learned, leaves a very particular kind of scar. David had 2 children of his own. Older. A boy and a girl who came on weekends and filled the house with a noise and a comfort that Claire never quite fit into. They had inside jokes she wasn't part of. They had a history with her mother that Claire hadn't been allowed to share. And slowly, without anyone meaning for it to happen, at least, that's what she told herself, Claire became the background character in her own family's story. She started eating faster at dinner, so she could be excused earlier. She stopped bringing home artwork from school because nobody hung it on the fridge anymore. She learned to be quiet in the way that kids learn to be quiet when they understand that their noise isn't welcome. And her mother who had once been her whole world, got busier, got pulled, got blurred, somehow, between the woman she used to be and the wife she was trying to become. Claire used to wait by the door when her mom came home from work, used to run to her. By the time she was 10, she'd stopped running. The hardest thing about growing up in a family that doesn't see you isn't the big moments. It's not the holidays or the arguments or the time someone says something that cuts right through you. Those are painful, yes. But the wounds that stay, the ones that follow you into adulthood like shadows, are made of smaller things. It's the moment your step-sibling gets the bigger bedroom and your mother says, "We just thought it made more sense." It's the school play where you had the lead role and you scanned the audience and found their faces 2 minutes after the curtain fell because they'd been parking the car. It's the way your name sounds different in your stepfather's mouth, not wrong, exactly, just careful. Like a word in a foreign language he learned too late to ever feel natural speaking. Claire carried all of it, tucked it behind her sternum and carried it. By the time she was in her 20s, she'd developed what her therapist would later call a hypervigilance for belonging. She was acutely, almost painfully aware of when she was included and when she wasn't. She could feel the shift in a room the moment she walked in, could sense within seconds whether she was welcome or whether she was tolerated. And she spent enormous energy, daily, trying to earn the difference. At work, she was the one who stayed late. The one who remembered birthdays and brought in food when someone had a hard week. With friends, she was the listener, the one who showed up, the one who gave and quietly hoped someone would notice and give something back. Some did. Most didn't. Not because they were unkind, but because Claire made herself so easy to take for granted. And then there was the phone call. The one she got on a Tuesday evening in March, 2 years ago. Her half-sister, David's daughter, Melissa, who'd grown up in that house alongside her without ever quite growing up with her, called to say that David had been diagnosed with early-stage Parkinson's. That the family was rallying. That her mother needed support. That everyone was going to come together. Everyone, Melissa said. And then, after the smallest pause, she added, "We figured you'd want to know. Not, we need you here." Not, please come. Just, we figured you'd want to know. Claire sat with the phone in her hand long after Melissa had hung up. She sat there in her kitchen, in her apartment, next to Gerald the coffee maker, and she felt something she hadn't expected to feel. Not anger, not grief, exactly. Relief. Because for the first time in her life, the thing she'd always suspected was finally said out loud. Not in cruelty, but in the casual, thoughtless honesty of someone who didn't realize what they were confirming. She wasn't part of the rally. She was someone to be notified. And somehow, knowing the truth, really knowing it clearly, without the fog of hope, was the first step towards something she hadn't dared to believe in yet. Herself. For 6 weeks after Melissa's phone call, Claire didn't reach out to anyone in her family. She went to work. She came home. She had long conversations with her therapist, a soft-spoken woman named Dr. Anand, who had a habit of asking questions and then going completely silent, leaving just enough space for Claire to stumble into her own answers. "Why do you think you felt relief?" Dr. Anand asked during the session after the call. Claire thought about it for a long time. Then she said, "Because I've been waiting my whole life for someone to tell me I was imagining it." She wasn't imagining it. But here's the thing about clarity, it doesn't always feel like freedom right away. Sometimes it feels like standing in a room after all the furniture has been removed. You can finally see the walls clearly. And the walls are bare. And the room is very, very quiet. Claire spent those 6 weeks in that quiet room. And then, on a Sunday morning in early May, she got into her car and drove 4 hours south. Not because her mother called. Her mother hadn't called, not once, in those 6 weeks. Not because Melissa asked her to come. She drove south because something in her had shifted, and she needed to look her family in the eye while she still had the courage to do it without rage. She pulled up to the house, her stepfather's house, the one with the fireplace and the family photos on the wall, and sat in the driveway for 11 minutes. She counted. She watched a sprinkler arc lazily across the front lawn, back and forth, like it had nowhere better to be. Then she got out of the car. Her mother opened the door before she even knocked. For a moment, neither of them said anything. Her mother looked smaller than Claire remembered, softer around the edges. There were things on her face that Claire recognized as guilt, and things that looked like love, and things she couldn't name at all. "You came," her mother said. "I came," Claire said. They sat at the kitchen table, just the two of them, David resting in the other room, and Claire did something she had never done in 37 years of living. She spoke without editing herself. She didn't soften the sentences or apologize before the hard parts. She didn't wrap her pain in qualifiers and footnotes so that it would be easier for her mother to swallow. She said, "I felt invisible in this house. For most of my childhood, I felt like I was disappearing, and I kept waiting for you to notice and you didn't notice. And I am not angry at you for that anymore, but I need you to know it happened." Her mother cried. Not the performative kind. The kind that comes from somewhere deep and old, the kind that sounds a little like old wood finally splitting under the weight of too many seasons. She said, "I didn't know." And then, honestly, wrenchingly, I should have known. It wasn't an apology that fixed everything. Claire didn't expect it to. She'd long since stopped believing that one conversation could close a wound that had been open for 3 decades. But it was a beginning. And beginnings, she was learning, mattered. Before she left, she stood in the hallway and looked at the family photos on the wall. All those Thanksgivings. All those muted tones. Burgundy, navy, cream. She found herself in each one. Small. A little off to the side. Smiling the smile she'd learned to perform. She looked at that girl for a long time. Then she touched the frame of the most recent photo, gently, like a goodbye. Here is what nobody tells you about healing from a family that couldn't see you. It isn't a single moment. It isn't the drive home with the windows down, and your favorite song playing, and some great cinematic feeling of release. It's quieter than that. It comes in pieces, when you least expect it, like light finding its way through a curtain you forgot you'd closed. For Claire, it started coming in small things. It came the morning she woke up and made herself a real breakfast, eggs and toast and orange juice, not because she was expecting company, but because she decided she deserved a real breakfast. It came the afternoon she said no to working late, without apologizing, without manufacturing an excuse. It came the evening she called a friend first, not because her friend needed something, but because Claire wanted to hear her voice. It came in therapy, slowly and sometimes painfully, as she began to understand something that sounded simple but had taken her 37 years to truly feel, that the love she had been seeking in that house, that frantic, desperate need to be chosen, to be seen, to matter, was love she had always been capable of giving herself. She just hadn't known she was allowed. She and her mother began talking on the phone. Not every week, not perfectly, not without awkward silences that sometimes stretched too long. But they talked. And slowly, something fragile and new began to grow between them. Not the mother-daughter relationship Claire had dreamed of as a little girl, but something more honest than that. Something with real roots. She never became close with Melissa. Some distances, she decided, were okay to leave as they were. But she stopped shrinking. That was the thing. That was the change that mattered most. Not the reconciliation, not the conversation at the kitchen table, not even the therapy. It was the moment Claire stopped making herself smaller so that other people wouldn't have to adjust. She stopped arriving at rooms apologetically. She stopped performing joy so that others would feel comfortable around her grief. She began, for the first time in her life, to take up her own space. 1 year after the visit, she moved to a bigger apartment. One with a window that faced a park. She bought a new coffee maker and didn't name it. She started a small book club with 4 women from her neighborhood, loud, opinionated women who argued about fiction and laughed too hard and never once made her feel like a background character. On the wall above her desk, she hung a single photograph. Not a family portrait. A photo she'd taken herself on a solo trip to the Oregon coast, of the ocean just before sunrise. Gray and vast and full of a beauty that asked nothing from you. She looked at it every morning. It reminded her that some things are magnificent not because of who sees them, but simply because they exist. Claire existed. And finally, after all this time, that was enough.